You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that's always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Dailey and Kevin Laramée.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One. Mark, it was a Canadian Grand Prix. It was quite an amazing weekend. The weather was great. The people were great. The drivers were great. Got a chance to meet a lot of my idols once again this year. But Mark, again, what a performance by Lewis Hamilton. Let's start there.
What is that now? The third Grand Slam this season? I know he did it in China and he did it at Montreal. And I'm thinking that there was one other one in there somewhere. But what an amazing weekend by Lewis Hamilton. That qualifying session on Saturday where he smashed the lap record not once, but twice was something in of itself. But to watch him go and just disappear down the circuit at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve and lead every single lap of the race was something to behold.
I hope you enjoyed our coverage throughout the weekend on our podcast feed, on our Instagram page, Facebook page as well. I had a lot of fun, Mark, taking a lot of pictures and discovered quite a different side of Formula One that, well, it's a sport that is really conducive to images. So I really enjoyed myself with that aspect. But we've talked about the qualifying. We've talked about the free practice sessions. The race itself, again, safety car. We've seen a safety car, virtual safety car. We saw Max Verstappen, quite an amazing start, bold start that led to a bad start for Vettel. And were you impressed by the way Verstappen came out of the Sennas with second position?
Well, that was an absolutely amazing start by Max, who was in fifth. But like you say, when he came out of the Senna S, he was in second position, and he just got a lot of grip. He got a lot of speed and a lot of bravery to put his car in front of Sebastian Vettel, who got a little bit sandwiched and obviously came out worse for wear, losing the end plate of his right front wing, which actually I think really told the story of the entire race, because Vettel had to pit to replace that wing, and it was rather an odd decision by Ferrari to keep him out on the track, because we should talk about this now. After the start, they get through the first couple of corners, and then there was an incident, to put it mildly, between Carlos Sainz in the Toro Rosso and Romain Grosjean in the Haas. And unfortunately,
Massa, yeah.
I was just going to say, poor old Felipe Massa was just a passenger who ended up getting taken out after Sainz forced Grosjean onto the grass, not once, but twice, and then spun out and then collected the back of Felipe Massa. But you did mention in one of the shows leading up to the race that we probably would see a safety car at Montreal. I just don't think we expected to see it that soon. Well, the start can be honest. Yeah, the start can be chaotic, so I guess it was rather fitting it did come out in the first lap.
First start with the big old new tires on this surface that it's not grippy, but it's more grippy now because of those tires and the mechanical grip of the cars and the more downforce than prior years. So they get to that turn and they have momentum, and a bit more momentum this year. And we know how the driver's been talking about. If you go Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, and Jenson Button, was really interesting to hear Button discovered this car when it was in Monaco, because he gave us a layman's term of those new regulations, saying, look, you're more confident as a driver with that car to try bold move. And we've seen Button try bold move, and I was expecting some drivers to try to do bold moves in the first few corners of the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on Sunday, because, well, they're more confident in their abilities with those cars, and they're like, well, you know what, I'm going to try, because if not, if my engine's not going to be powerful enough, I'm not going to be able to keep up over the course of the 70 laps. And I told you this on Saturday. We've seen Hamilton and the Mercedes be very fast in the one lap, and that's because of the engine. And I was saying, look, Force India might be dangerous. They might be battling the Red Bulls here just because of the pure amount of horsepower they do have compared to the Renault, compared to the Ferrari engine, to that matter. We've seen it Sunday, the Mercedes engine was really powerful, more generating more horsepower than any other engine on Sunday.
Well, if you look at it, the top 6 cars, 4 of them were powered by Mercedes. Obviously, the 2 Mercedes Works cars in first and second. And then, as you mentioned, the 2 Force Indias in fifth and sixth. And then you only had a single Ferrari in fourth place, which was Sebastian Vettel. And I thought that Seb did a great job. I thought that it was a very strange decision to leave him out basically when they had a free pit stop when the safety car came out on the track. And the explanation that Vettel gave after the race was that they didn't actually know how bad the damage was. And obviously only going through a couple of corners, he didn't really get a good feel for how it was affecting the aerodynamics. But once they restarted the race, when he went down that long back straightaway at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, the wing completely collapsed, and then Seb had to come in immediately the next lap. And that was really the worst case scenario, because it really put him back down, basically, I think, right at the very the very back, 18th, yeah. So not quite the very back of the race order, but not too far from it.
Well,
but
pretty much the very back, because the rest of the car were already out. So it was basically
that's
one
true,
of the
yes.
last car of the track at that point.
Well, yes, it was. And I thought that he did a phenomenal job to fight all the way back up to fourth position. And I think it's quite interesting, because if you go back a couple of weeks to Monaco, and you see the weekend that Lewis Hamilton had and how he qualified poorly, but he did an exceptionally good job to fight his way up to seventh. It was almost a very similar situation for Sebastian Vettel, although Seb did a very good job to qualify in second. Just the circumstances surrounding the start and that first lap, put him back so far down the race order. And it was really at that point getting as many points as he could just to minimize the damage, if you want to call it that, because Hamilton said at Monaco it was just about getting some points out of that race, and Vettel, it could have been a lot worse. If he didn't score any points, or if he was knocked out of the race in that corner, then they would be dead even. As it is, they go to Azerbaijan in a couple of weeks, and Lewis is 12 points behind, so he managed to half the gap. So not the worst situation for Vettel, but it could have been better.
No, it could have been better, of course. He was a victim of circumstances with the touch with Verstappen, and he basically, that's the expression that Martin Brundle said, he shaved the front wing of Sebastian Vettel. So just a few pieces broke off, but those pieces that creates the beginning of the airflow that then is directed to the rest of the car to create the right aspect of cutting through the air is so important to the entire performance of the car, that just a little piece broken in the front of your car makes a big old difference. And the fact that they waited maybe a little too long before addressing the situation cost them the few seconds that maybe made the difference in the last lap, where if he had maybe 30 seconds more, he would have taken Ricciardo in the last lap, which he would have if there would have been 72 laps instead of 70. He had that type of pace. He was the fastest car on the track late in the race because of fresh tires and a good situation overall. If it wasn't for that hesitation before addressing the front wing situation for Vettel, it would have been maybe a podium for him.
It very well could have been. And just that whole situation I find a little bit strange. And just the race itself, if you just take it as a one-off, it almost seemed like we'd gone back to 2016 with both Mercedes cars disappearing down the road. Okay, well, Hamilton was about 19 and a half, 20 seconds ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who finished in second. Then you had a Red Bull, then you had the Ferrari, and you had the strange Ferrari decision-making on the pit wall. So I'm really hoping that once they get to the European Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time, it's going to be a little bit more of what we've seen. But it is just proving to be a very fascinating and exciting season. And it is really refreshing that even though you have this dominant Mercedes performance this week, and like I say, it kind of makes me feel like it's 2016 all over again, it seems to change every weekend. You get to one circuit that seems to be better suited to the Ferrari, another circuit is better suited to the Mercedes, and then at other times both cars are equally suited to the track, and you get a good scrap like we saw a little bit in Spain there between Hamilton and Vettel. So it really bodes well for the rest of the season. And I think that Mercedes should be credited for all the hard work that they've put in over the last couple of weeks, because after they left Monaco, it was really looking rather bleak, because Ferrari, they completely dominated not only the race, but also qualifying. And it was looking that perhaps maybe they'd be running away with it, which necessarily wouldn't be a bad thing. But I think for everybody that is looking forward to a more exciting world championship, that if they're going to continue to trade punches like this, it's going to be exciting for the rest of the season.
Toto Wolff mentioned after the race on Sky Sports that over the last 10 days in the factory in England, they were working round the clock, 24/7, 3 shifts. Always somebody working in development, in the factory, making new pieces, making sure things are okay, in the simulators, making tests, making runs, making long-term testing on some pieces, on some cars, to make sure reliability is there, to make sure the power is there, to make sure there is what was needed to do a 1-2 in Montreal. And you have seen the result of that hard work. And yeah, sometimes say, oh, it's boring, silver hours, we're going to dominate again. Well, we have to give credit where it's due. Hard work. They're hard work, but not just hard work. It's not just working, because you can work your butt off and not achieve anything. It's their way of working. It's their engineering. It's the thought process, the methodology of working, of the environment, of everything that creates a outburst of result, basically. And we've seen this. It's the cold German way to build cars reflected in literally building a Formula One car.
Absolutely. And they have done a great job in the attention to detail and just understanding the setup of the car, because that was the problem that they had in Monaco a couple of weeks ago, was that although that the car fundamentally was good, that every time they needed to get performance in a certain area, the adjustments that they made actually made the car worse. And the big problem that they were having was just getting those tires in the optimum temperature range, and they couldn't always get the front tires and the rear tires to get to that proper temperature at the same time. And we saw the problems that they had as a result of it. So, like I say, it looks a little bit ominous for the rest of Formula One if Mercedes can keep doing what they've been doing in Canada, but it is only one race. And so far through 7 races, I still think you have to give the edge to the Ferrari.
Oh, no, absolutely. The Ferrari car is the most... I had the word and I just forgot it. Here, it is the car that has been the most reliable. It hasn't the car that has been the most well-rounded this season so far. It has been able to do well in smaller circuit, urban circuit, road circuit type of situation, Monaco, Montreal, and then classical circuit. It has an advantage where there's not big straightaways like Montreal, where the Ferrari engine might be a little bit off the Mercedes engine, but the Ferrari as a car might be a little bit better than the Mercs. So I think they're pretty much even depending on which circuit. I think in the next few races, we'll still be seeing a battle between the two, depending on the upgrades, depending on the amount of resources devoted to the car this year. Because, Mark, it's already June. We're already almost mid-June. They're going to start to focus their attention to 2018 sooner rather than later. And it's important to see the amount of resources to the 2017 upgrades that could influence the actual battles on the track now.
Well, it's funny you should mention 2018 and all the development that are going to go into the cars for next year. Renault have actually come out and said that there are going to be no major upgrades to their engine before 2018, which is a little bit interesting because we've heard rumors here and there over the past several weeks that there was going to be an engine upgrade coming for Red Bull, who've done some fairly good work, I think, developing their car. And Danny Ricciardo has obviously done a very good job getting 3 straight podiums in what is obviously not the greatest Red Bull that I think that we've seen over the last couple of years. It's just, well, I think it's obviously going to be more the engine rather than the car itself, but they definitely have underwhelmed and underperformed this year. So I think they deserve a little bit of credit, but that's also a little bit concerning for Red Bull because I think they were counting to get an engine upgrade at some point during the season. And I think from what I heard before that it was supposed to be out about this time of the season. By the time they went back to the European portion of the calendar. So maybe it's not going to happen for them.
True, and it is maybe a slight concern for Red Bull and for Renault F1. But interesting aspect is Renault F1 is investing millions and tens of millions of dollars in their factory, in their F1 resources, in their F1 infrastructures for the future, for now. They're all in motorsport as well, in Formula E, in racing, in endurance to have their presence with motors and stuff. They are really present overall in motor racing. I wouldn't be surprised if Renault would show up in NASCAR in the next few years. But now I do feel that it's just a question of time. And maybe they have pushed back for 2018 for, well, disguises purposes. You want to maybe hide what you're potentially capable of. And I'm still, like I mentioned this last year, I mentioned it earlier this year, whenever Renault goes away or goes hiding or stop doing something and comes back, they usually come back with a bang. And we're still expecting that bang, and maybe the delay of upgrades, or maybe you have to spin it the other way around, their focus on upgrading the 2018 version of what they have now. And maybe they come back with a bigger bang and in a brand new season where you don't have to start already catching up on points like Renault F1 is doing now, but in a way where you start a blank slate next year in Australia, and maybe if you have a great engine, you can fight for wins. And that's the type of comeback that I'm expecting in the near future. So maybe that's the mentality behind the delay of the upgrades.
Well, that's true, but I think that Renault does deserve some credit. Nico Hülkenberg finished in a very respectable 8th position, and even Jolyon Palmer finished a race, which is respectable in of itself. So they're 7th currently in the Constructors' Championship. They only have 18 points, but if you look, they're only 4 points behind Williams, who have 22, and even Toro Rosso, they have 29 points. So those are the sorts of teams that they're fighting with, and I think that we've seen some good things every once in a while from Renault so far this year, and it's only going to get better. So. Shall we talk about the other half of the Williams team now? I just mentioned it.
I think it's time, Mark, that we do.
It's well overdue.
Way overdue. 17 minutes in. It's time for our weekly segment, Taking a Stroll with Lance. But this time around, it's a positive stroll. It's not even a stroll. It's an actual race. It's that moment that I have been talking about over the last few weeks. I don't know if he got angry, but he actually showed on the track that he can overtake, that he does belong there. He showed that he can get points. And I said points. He got 2, Mark. Lance Stroll got 2 points.
Well, I think it was a well and long overdue, obviously, for Stroll. He's been under increasing pressure over the last couple of weeks. There's no doubt that the season has been very difficult for him so far this year. Some things were his fault, some things weren't, and some was just a little bit of bad luck. But I thought that he had a very good race on Saturday, and it was good to see him scrapping and fighting with some of the other drivers. And a P9, I think, is a great result for him. And I think it's quite ironic, too, that the first Canadian driver who has a name other than Villeneuve to score points in the Formula One World Championship was labeled by Jacques Villeneuve as possibly the worst rookie that Formula One has ever seen.
I saw that.
And that's
it's a shame that Villeneuve would say that before the race, and it's the first race that he made points. But you know what? I had a feeling like it when I saw him. Like, I think it's the first moment that I can say that I can get behind Lance Stroll now. I think that moment happened. Before I was like, all right, you're an F1. All right, you got a Williams. Do something with it. He did something with it on Sunday. And now I think I can fully give him my support.
Well, definitely. I think that the bar was set rather high for Lance when you look at some of the guys that he has to contend with. And obviously, Max Verstappen is going to be the one name that everybody thinks of. And Max, I think, just demonstrates just how truly an exceptional talent that he is. And there have been many things that have been said about Lance Stroll and just the whole fact that, you know, his dad has lots of money, and the Prima Power team that he's raced for in Formula 3 over the past couple of years was basically set up and structured around him so that he had the best opportunity for success, which I suppose is a fair comment. But still, I mean, you're taking a guy that's 18 years old, you're throwing him into a Formula 1 car, which is a big step, but then you're throwing him into a Formula 1 car that is a completely different one to the car that he did testing in last year, which was an older specification, and it's obviously been a difficult and a very steep learning curve for the guy. And even Lewis Hamilton said earlier this year, back in winter testing, that there couldn't be a worse time for a guy like Lance Stroll to come into Formula One as it would be this year, when everything was completely new, the new cars, the new tires, the new everything. So I think that it's really taken him a long time to really find his feet, and I'm really hoping that after he scored 2 points on his home track in Montreal, that it's given him some confidence and maybe just gives him that satisfaction in knowing, yeah, you know what, I do belong here, I can compete with these guys, and it's going to get better from here on out.
The thing, too, is Lance Stroll had a terrible schedule this week. The amount of media, press, radio, TV shows, sponsor meetings, hanging out wherever, whenever he's told, wow. And it's amazing that he was able to handle all that, the pressure of the first time he races on the circuit, at home, and on top of it. All that happens as well the same weekend where he gets points. So for the future, it bodes well, because next time he comes in Montreal next year, there's no pressure. There's no pressure whatsoever, because he already got points here. It's going to be his second season, and I think even going to Baku, I think a lot of pressure is going to drop off now. And now it's going to be qualifying. Qualifying has been challenging. He has made it to Q3. He has been able to be fast at some point in some qualifying sessions. If he can parlay this finish in the points to a top 10 maybe starts 12 and higher, and maybe gets a chance to battle for 8th, and maybe we see more overtaking. And now we started talking of the potential of a Williams. And if it was a little bit better, maybe they're talking about close to a battling Rebel. But that's where we're talking, that the potential of this car. And we've seen the potential of this car with Massa, because that's where Massa is, between 6th and 10th, usually in qualifying, and being way better, like over a second and a half than Stroll usually on average. So if Stroll can do a little bit better on the qualifying and give him a chance to not needing to overtake more than 5 cars in a race to finish in the points situation, maybe he can actually get more points starting in Baku.
Well, you made a very good point there, and just by saying that he scored points now, so that's literally the proverbial monkey off of his back. So now it's not this theoretical thing in front of him, this carrot dangling in front of him that, you know, I still have to score my first points in Formula One, and it's proven so difficult. And like you say, now that he's done that and he's achieved that, hopefully that weight has just fallen off of his shoulders. And I think that Baku could be a good track for the Williams. Obviously, you've got several very long straightaways there, some very fast sections to that track, and I think that is suited to the Williams, or at least the Mercedes power in the Williams. Whether or not it is designed or built to go through the twistier sections there, you know, that very narrow part that goes around by the castle there, that's something else. But at least in the long straight sections, I think that will be an advantage for them. But
the thing is, I don't think 2 cars fit wide now because of the wider tires. It's so narrow close to the castle there.
Maybe one car wouldn't even make it through there.
Exactly,
now. We don't know,
because it's kind of twisty and a little bit uphill. So It's going to be interesting to see how those big old back tires once again are going to do. But, you know, overall, the race, I want to go back to Force India, Mark, for a second before we move on. And Esteban Ocon, the way he handles himself, the way he enjoyed himself in Montreal, French-speaking territory, embracing the crowd. He mentioned how it almost feels like a home race for him now. And he really enjoyed the power in his Mercedes engine. And it was kind of fun to see the Force India up front. I was expecting it because of the engine, because of the one thing they do have is reliability. And I predicted this on the show this week, and the teams mentioned the same thing after the race. You cannot hide the flaws of your car on Ile Notre Dame, but if your car is well put together, it will shine through, even if you're not the most biggest budget team. If your car is just well-tuned, decent aerodynamics, and a great engine, you'll do good. And we have seen this with reliability from Force India, Mark, and it was impressive, and I really starting to really like Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, I really like this guy, even going back to last year when he had those several races in the Manor, which obviously was one of the least competitive cars in Formula One last year. But he gets the empty seat at Force India after Nico Hülkenberg moves over to Renault. And I think he's a very talented driver. There was some very interesting discussion on BBC after the race that perhaps Valtteri Bottas shouldn't be looking over his shoulder at, say, Pascal Wehrlein, who's another one of the young Mercedes drivers. But the one Mercedes driver or contracted driver that he should be looking out for is Esteban Ocon. And when you see what he did on Sunday at the Canadian Grand Prix, you can understand why. And I really think that he should have been able to get past Checo Perez and try and make a run at Danny Ricciardo. And that's obviously had a bit of stirred up a little bit of controversy, obviously, what with the team and Perez not really backing him. And Perez, I think he must have taken the stance that, well, if Ocon thinks he's faster than me, then he's got to get around me. I'm not going to make it easier for him.
Yeah, get around me first if you want to get around the guy in front of me. Who do you think you are, kid?
Exactly, right? Because, I mean, Perez, I think, is always a bit of an interesting guy to talk about because his sponsor is one of the richest men in Mexico and one of the richest men in the world. I believe he's a telecom billionaire. And his name...
Yes, Telcel is the company.
Yes, that's correct. And I always forget his name. I don't know why.
Don't ask me.
Well, you remember the company's name, which is
yes. Well,
a lot better than I did.
I've been to Mexico City, and it's just everywhere. So
everywhere.
It's like Starbucks in the rest of North America.
Well, there you go. But yeah, so I mean, Perez has been linked a couple of times with maybe possibly a move to Ferrari if that seat gets opened up, if Kimi Räikkönen doesn't come back. And there's been a lot of speculation there. But I think that Esteban Ocon has really given the team really an interesting problem, if you want to put it that way, because here you have this young guy that's coming in and challenging a guy that's a veteran driver who's been in the series for several years. And I think that Perez might have had his nose out of joint a little bit having to deal with that. And I don't think that Force India was perhaps even prepared for such a situation. They've said that they're going to have to change what they call their rules of engagement following the incident in Canada.
But there's no incident. They didn't touch each other. There was no fighting on the track. And you know what? If I like both of the drivers' reaction, because both of the drivers show race fight, quote unquote. They want to be faster. And look, if I'm Esteban Ocon and I think I'm faster, yeah, I'm gonna say that. I'll be like, hey team, how about you tell the other guy to let me through because I think I'm faster. And if I'm Perez, I think I'm faster. I would react the same way too. Like, if you want to get past me, pass me. So I like to see that fighting instinct, and it's for the best of the car. Yes, this time around it didn't work, and Ricciardo finished on the podium. And who knows? They would probably not even have got Ricciardo, and Vettel was going to come back anyway. So at the end, it's a moot point. But I do still like to see the fight that both drivers showed. And this is kind of what it's all about, no? It's not about... Yeah, it's about the car, it's about all that, but you want to see personalities, and we have seen that from those two. And Esteban Ocon has probably made a lot of more fans than just me this weekend. So that's great to see going forward.
Definitely. And the cardinal rule, of course, is never take out your teammate. And they didn't tangle. They didn't have any moments like that where they would take each other out of the race, which is just obviously the worst situation for both the drivers and the teams. And I see both points of view. If Ocon feels that he's faster, then perhaps he wants the team to tell Perez to move out of the way so he can challenge the guy in front of him. But if you're Perez, of course, you're going to say, well, yeah, maybe he thinks he's faster than me, but he's got to prove it. If he thinks he's faster, get around me and, then just disappear down the track, then that's the way it's supposed to be. But I think it's really good. And I think it's really, I think it's a good situation for Force India to have. I don't want to say that they've been kind of like a nothing team, but I mean, they've been a team that always maybe lacked that little bit of spark. And I think that really added something to them. I mean, they're one of those teams that is very reliable, always shows up, and it's kind of like one of the best of the rest kind of teams. But I thought that was a really, really good moment. I think a bit of a benchmark moment in their history as a team.
Go back to 8-9 years ago or something. This was a back of the grid type of team. So they have come a long way. We forget that before the money, before the good engine, before the resources and the seriousness that this car was sponsored by Tata for the former car manufacturers back then, right? So this has come a long way. This team, this incarnation of the team has gone through difficult times over the years, and now it has shown that it does know how to build a good car if it's given some great tools. And they figured out that, look, we'll get a great engine, we'll get the Mercedes engine as a client, and we're going to absorb that big loss, and we'll try to make it work financially, and we're going to have a decent car, and we're going to be in the points. And look, we're fourth in the Constructors' Championship. We're closer to Red Bull than they're behind us, and it's onwards and forwards, and everything's looking good. Everything's, well, you know what? La vie est rose. They're seeing La vie en rose, literally.
Absolutely. And it's quite a different situation for Force India compared to, you know where I'm going with this one.
from pink to orange.
Orange, yes. Well, gosh. What is there even left to say at this point?
Conspiracy theory time. Was it really something wrong with Fernando Carr, or did he pull off that famous threat that he mentioned in Spanish a few months ago where, if I'm not in the points and the car's not doing too good and there's a few laps remaining, I'm going to park the car and walk to the pits?
Well, what was that? No, that wasn't China, because he didn't finish in China. That was in Bahrain, wasn't it? Where he he parked it about 2 or 3 laps from the end. But when I saw him pull off on the side there, I think it was on the last lap, was it not? If not the last lap,
yeah, it was the 2 laps ago.
Yeah.
And the broadcast of the Sky Sports broadcast were saying that it could be just running out of fuel because they're not allowed to refuel, right? So you leave with the same amount of fuel for everyone. But if your engine is a little bit more thirsty during the race, and again, on Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, you cannot hide your flaws. If your engine consumes too much fuel, you might run out. So that was an hypothesis. It's a sudden loss of power mixed with just nothing working right 2 laps to go. But some conspiracy theorists would say that Fernando and his reaction after going through the fans, tossing the glove, and embracing the crowd, making himself as the good guy in this, and really putting the emphasis on the car. I actually made a lapsus. I was going to say the emphasis, but it's the impetus too on the car.
It does, and it's just, I can't believe we're still sitting here 7 races into the season and we're still talking about the same things. I would have expected to see some improvement in reliability in that Honda engine by this point in the season. We've seen a slight improvement in the performance. We saw that in Spain. Obviously, Fernando probably had an extra 40 or 50 horsepower just because of all the hundreds of thousands of people that showed up to cheer him on. So that was part of it. But still, it just completely blows my mind that this far into the season that it just seems to be going from bad to worse. But the whole Honda situation just really fascinates me, because what with them signing a deal with Sauber for next year really proves to me that they're committed to staying in Formula One. And they're probably have come to the realization at some point that they're going to be in Formula One, but they're not going to be in the back of McLaren. And if you're to believe the rumors that have been going around the past several days, the reality of the return to McLaren and Mercedes power could not be too far off in the future. Yeah,
because there's one client spot remaining for Mercedes because of the downfall of Manor. So because of that, Mercedes still has the infrastructure capabilities to give engines to one team. So if McLaren is able to find a way to breach a contract with Honda and become a client of the Mercedes engine, this might actually resolve all their problem. Because right now, Mark, not only do they look terrible on the track with reliability, with a lack of power, it doesn't look good for the sponsors. They're going to lose sponsors if it continues to be like this. So we're talking about a loss of money, and we're talking about a big machine, and McLaren F1 and McLaren as a whole, it's pretty big, but it's driven by this, and we're talking about a loss of prestige, and that is, this could take years and billions of dollars almost to repair. It's a type of thing that is very touchy. It's intangible. Yes, you cannot touch it. It's tough to grasp, but losing prestige as a brand could be a consequence of the failures of McLaren F1 as a car with the partnership with Honda over the last few years, and you don't want that to happen. You need to make a big shake-up to find a way to be competitive, and if it's to find a way to breach out of that contract, become a client of the Mercedes engine, and having more power next year will be it.
Well, they've got to do something, and I think that getting a Mercedes engine, or at least striking up that partnership with Mercedes, would be about the only thing that they could really do at this point to try and keep Fernando with the team for next year and possibly beyond, because they must have done quite a sales job to get him to move over there from Ferrari a couple of years ago. And obviously, as we know, it just has not turned out good for Fernando Alonso. Getting up there in age a little bit, knowing that he probably only has a couple of years left to challenge for a world championship again in the world's top motor racing series. So obviously, he must be frustrated beyond belief with the situation and just the lack of reliability, the lack of power, the lack of anything. As the whole team must be, because they keep saying that they have a very good car, that the car technically and just the handling of it it's a good car. It's just very underpowered.
We've seen Fernando pull off a 7th in qualifying. There is potential in that car. So can you imagine if they do? Look, you're talking about 15 horsepower at any single moment that they're missing, and at some point on the track, on the straightaways, it's over 50. So that's about a second and a half per lap. It's crazy, the amount of chassis development that you need to make better than everybody else to compensate for that lack of power. You got to get those seconds somewhere, right? You got to try to make it somewhere, and then reliability becomes an issue because you try to shave so much weight off the rest of the car to compensate for that lack of power. Because if your engine is not strong enough, you want to make the car as light as possible, and you make pieces a little too thin, and reliability becomes an issue. So it's a vicious cycle that McLaren Honda has been on now, and maybe there's no way out. Maybe the only way out is Honda out. So you remember hashtag Winger out? Now I think it's time. I think it's time for hashtag Honda out.
I think so. It's just gotten to the point where I think that this relationship is beyond repair, no pun intended. But
the car's beyond repair. Relationship too.
Yeah, it cannot continue, and they have to do something drastic. It was like we were saying the other week, either they're going to have to start firing people and shaking things up, but you know, let's be fair. I mean, you could fire Zach Brown, or you could fire Eric Boullier, or you could fire anybody you want at McLaren, but that's not going to make the engine that's in the back of the car any better. It is not their problem. It is, unfortunately, there is nothing they can do about it other than get on the phone to Tokyo and yell at everybody at Honda to get their act together and threaten that they're going to break their partnership as soon as they possibly can and get a Mercedes engine or whatever the options that they have. But that's all they can really do. At the end of the day, you, as in any area of life, you partner with other people and you just expect that people are going to deliver on their word, and unfortunately, Honda has not been able to deliver what McLaren expects, and it's the results have obviously been nothing short of disastrous.
We all have been in a relationship where it doesn't go according to plan, and we stay in that relationship just a bit too long, and we come to a moment of realization, saying, "You know what? I have to find a way out of that relationship." And the words used by Zach Brown after the race were kind of strong. never using like it's over, we're going to pull out, but using words like we need to find a solution to this problem ASAP. Using words like we need to resolve this. Using words like we need to find a way to be effective, competitive as soon as possible, and all options are on the table. So, well, if you read between the line, I think the decision has been taken, and it's up to lawyers to agree on how to do it.
Well, just to maybe underline this discussion, Kevin, before we wrap it up for tonight, there's that old saying, that breakup saying that it's not you, it's me. I think that
Honda,
if McLaren and McLaren are going to break up, I think if McLaren were to say, it's not us, it's you, I think it's justified.
Well, if Honda's honest, and I think they are,
yeah,
they have to come to McLaren to be like, you know what? We effed up. We apologize. Let's destroy that contract. We're gonna move on to Sauber. You do your thing. Let's not burn the bridge. We'll see what happens down the road. But for now, you go with the sure thing, and we'll work on our prototypes for now.
Yeah, it's probably the best thing that they can do, and Sauber just must be. They must be really eager to get those new engines, because if you look at where they were this weekend and where they've been going over the past several races, that with that old spec Ferrari engine,
I have a lot to say, Mike. I'm sorry, Mike, to interrupt. I know I met a few. I have my sources, so let's just put it this way. I've always wanted to say this. I have my sources, and according to sources, there's a lot of horsepower missing in that Ferrari engine because of last year's spec. We've seen it with us. There's been struggling, even though they finish in points from time to time. But it's not made to be in the back of cars with the same type of wheel that they have this year, those type of things. So it resulted in lack of performance. And because of Sauber's financial trouble in the offseason and being saved by the FOM and F1 late in the offseason, development for the car started really late, and we have seen them just trying to catch up, and it has been difficult. And even though a 13th for Ericsson could be seen as a decent result, 15th for Verline, they do lack a lot of horsepower, and over 50 according to some calculations.
That is substantial. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So it will be interesting to see now that Sauber's short-term future is kind of okay, how they develop 2018. And that might be the resurgence of not necessarily a top 10 Sauber team that we've seen sometimes, but more of a battling for close to at least closer to 11th than 15th most of the time. And I think if they focus their energy on developing next year, there's potential, because there's a lot of great minds, a lot of great people working for Sauber, and I do wish them the best. It's their 25th year anniversary this year, and it's kind of a shame that it's happening the way it's happening this year, and the morale is probably not the best, but I do wish everyone at Sauber a great rest of the season, and go on to Baku with your chin up.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And while you were talking there, I was just sort of thinking about where should Sauber be, and I think that they should be fighting with teams like Renault, Toro Rosso, and the Force Indias. So to see them languishing at the back so far behind everyone else is quite disappointing. I mean, I have my doubts about how good of a driver Marcus Ericsson is, but I think that Pascal Wehrlein is obviously legit. I mean, he's a young guy, but I mean, he's one of the Mercedes young drivers, and you obviously don't get that contract if you lack talent or anything in those areas. So. And we saw with Wehrlein at several times last year driving the very uncompetitive manner to get into Q2 a couple of times, and we've seen him have his moments again this year. And I mean, he missed the first 2-3 races of the year after he had that crash at the Race of Champions. So it's just a shame, and especially Sauber. I mean, they've been around for like you say, 25 years. To see them so far back and so uncompetitive is just it's sad. It's sad to see for them and also for Formula One.
And it's a team that Jacques Villeneuve did drive for, so it always have a special place in my heart. I know I'm a homer, but you can't take this away from me. We only had one, really. Well, we had two Villeneuves, and now, well, hey, Lance Stroll, the first non-Villeneuve Canadian to score points. So maybe we have a third one that I can cheer for. But it's always fun to cheer for a driver in Formula 1. And you know what? All in all, Mark, a great Canadian Grand Prix. I had an amazing time. I can't wait for next year. I can't wait to go in the pits and actually talk to those people. We forget sometimes how big and huge Formula 1 is, but it's made of people. It's made of great people, of very smart people, of very educated, dedicated people, and from broadcast to team to everyone. It's always a pleasure to rub shoulders at the track with all of them, and I can't wait for next year to continue to explore this wonderful world. And we forget how huge it is, and it's just made of wonderful people, and I can't wait to talk to those people again.
Absolutely. And before we wrap it up tonight, I should just mention that after long last, the official website for Scuderia F1 Pod is up live. I'm populating it with content all the time, and that's very easy to find. Just hop online, going over to www.scuderiaf1pod.com. We'll post all the podcasts there, plus some race reviews and previews whenever we have the opportunity to do some stuff. So we're looking forward to that, and it was about time. I think in order for the show to grow, we needed to break it off and give it its own website. So it'll be a bit of work in progress, but definitely a project that I think we're both looking forward to getting up and running. So,
yep. And before Baku, Mark, now I am turning my attention starting tomorrow morning. I will start working exactly toward France, Le Mans. It's next weekend, and I will work on a show. Probably going to be recording on a Wednesday, some point during the day. We'll see the visibility of the show, but I want to do it similar to Indy 500, so I'm going to do my research. I'm going to bring some classic audio from Le Mans, and I will bring you another version of the show I did a few weeks ago.
Very cool. Well, we look forward to that coming. And of course, we'll just keep doing what we do here all the time. So we'll have that and some other our regular weekly show and whatever else we can come up with in between.
Exactly. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kev Laramée and the network at SportsPodNet.
Very cool. And you can follow me on Twitter at MarkJRDailey, and that is Dailey with an L-E-Y at the end. And you can follow the show Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod. And that's it. That's a wrap, Kevin. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you all very much for listening. We'll catch you again this time next week.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.